The wind screamed down off the Tetons, dragging snow with it like knives, and when Clara Yates opened the barn door that morning, she thought it was just the storm groaning again. But then he fell forward, boots dragging, blood streaked across the snow, and the world shifted. He collapsed at her feet. She didn't move at first, just stared. The man was half frozen, wrapped in a torn Union coat, crusted with old mud and fresh blood. His face was shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat iced over at the edges. His right hand twitched toward a holster that was empty. Then she saw it. The shaft of an arrow protruding from his back, snapped off just below the feathers. "God Almighty," she muttered, kneeling. His eyes fluttered open, pale blue, like thawing river ice. Don't let them find me." She glanced toward the tree-line. Snow-covered pines stood silent, watching. No sign of riders, but her gut twisted all the same. She hauled him in under the shelter, grunting against his weight, and slammed the barn door shut behind them. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, it was still, save for the rasp of his breath and the muffled clink of something metal falling from his coat pocket. She bent and picked it up. A silver star. U.S. Marshal. And underneath that half-crumpled, blood-stained, was a wanted poster. His face. His name, Elias Rourke. Reward, $10,000. Dead or alive, asterisk, asterisk. Clara stared at it for a long moment. $10,000. She could buy the land she lost when her husband died, replace every mule and cow stolen by the bandits who butchered him last spring, build a new house, maybe start again in Missouri with her sister. But the man was groaning again, face pale, sweat thick on his brow despite the cold. She shoved the poster into her apron pocket and knelt beside him. "You pull this out, or you want me to?" He blinked. "Out. Clean it." She nodded once and fetched her tools. The arrowhead was deep and blood had soaked the back of his coat. Clara cut through the fabric with her sewing shears and cleaned the wound with whiskey from her father's old flask. The smell stung her nose, and Rourke gritted his teeth but didn't cry out. She saw then the depth in him. Not just the wound, but the quiet grit of a man who'd been through worse and lived with it. When the arrowhead came free, he slumped, still breathing but barely. She stitched the wound closed and wrapped it tight with linen. He'd need days of rest, maybe weeks. But she had no such luxury to give. Snow was falling thicker now, coating the ground. And when the snow came like this, men on horses didn't leave tracks long. She dragged him into the root cellar behind the barn, lit only by a single oil lamp. It smelled of onions, damp soil, and death, not literal, but the memory of it. Her husband had died 6 feet from where she stood. "You got the worst luck, Marshal," she muttered, covering him with a quilt. "I don't know if you're a good man or the devil himself, but something tells me either way. Trouble's coming behind you." She shut the cellar hatch and locked it. An hour passed before they arrived. 3 riders. She watched from the porch as they trotted into the clearing, long coats flapping, horses steaming from the run. The leader was sharp-featured with a scar running down the left side of his chin, like lightning. He dismounted slow, boots crunching on snow. "Morning, ma'am." Clara rested her hand near the Henry rifle leaned against the doorframe. "Not much of morning." "Fair enough," the man said. "Name's Creed. Silas Creed. These 2 are my associates." The others nodded, unspeaking. "We're looking for someone. Dangerous man. Real slippery. Might be wounded." He pulled a folded paper from his coat and held it out. Clara took it. It was the same poster. Rourke's face. That reward. "Don't reckon I've seen him," she said, handing it back. "Heard shots last night. Down toward the river." She nodded. "Could have been hunters." "You live out here alone?" Clara's lips thinned. "I manage." Creed glanced past her, toward the barn. "Mind if we take a look around?" "I do," she said. "Ain't nothing of yours on this land." He tilted his head. "Law's offering 10,000 to the man who brings him in, and I said I ain't seen him." For a beat, the only sound was the wind. Then Creed smiled. "Well, if you see anything or anyone, you holler." They rode off slow, but not far. An hour later, smoke curled up from a camp just inside the trees. She didn't sleep that night. Rourke stirred once around midnight, fevered, muttering something about a judge. A ring. The word framed escaped his lips before he fell back under. Clara watched the flames in her hearth flicker, thoughts gnawing at her. If she gave him up, she'd have justice, of a sort, for her husband, for her land, for every quiet humiliation she'd swallowed since burying him with his boots off and blood on his chest. But the man in the cellar hadn't begged, hadn't lied. He looked like someone who'd had every ounce of hope wrung from him and yet had clawed his way forward anyway. She recognized that look. She carried it every time she passed the broken fence line where Joseph had fallen. By dawn, she'd made her choice. The sky was gray with snow clouds. Chickens pecked nervously in the yard. The mule chewed hay, unfazed by the strangers lurking beyond the trees. Clara opened the cellar door. Rourke stirred. He looked worse. Pale, sweating, eyes sunken. "You still breathing, Marshal?" He nodded weakly. "You got maybe a few hours, for they figure I'm lying." His lips parted. "You helping me?" She handed him a cup of broth. "Don't make me regret it." He drank slowly, and when he finished, she saw the color inch back into his face. "You shouldn't have pulled the arrow," he whispered. "I know," she said. He looked up at her. "They'll kill you too." She didn't flinch. Let him try. By mid-morning, she was hitching the mule to the old sled used to carry lumber. Rourke, barely able to sit up, leaned on her shoulder. Every step he took was agony, she could tell, but he didn't groan. They bundled him in blankets, tucked the rifle close, and set off toward the western trail, an old smuggler's path winding through the pines toward Dead Man's Creek. Snow hissed beneath the runners. Clara kept one eye on the tree line. By noon, they'd covered 3 miles. And then hooves. Behind them, closing fast. She snapped the reins. The mule balked. Rourke coughed blood. She veered the sled off the trail into a narrow ravine, hoping the powder was deep enough to hide their tracks. Voices echoed off the canyon walls. Rourke, Creed's voice, mocking, confident. "We're coming for you, Marshal. Might as well save us the trouble." Clara slid behind a rock, rifle ready. Rourke tried to sit up, but she pressed a hand on his chest. "Not yet." Snow started falling harder. The storm was coming. She knew then they wouldn't outrun it. Or them. She looked at Rourke. "If you got anything worth telling me, now's the time." His eyes fluttered open, lips cracked. "Judge Holbrook owns the bounty ring. Pays off marshals to bring in the innocent. Anyone who talks disappears." She nodded once. "And you?" "I tried to stop him." She stood. "Well, you're going to get another chance." She fired once toward the tree line, just enough to send Creed ducking. Then she grabbed the reins and drove the sled harder into the snow, praying the storm would bury their trail before blood did. When night came, they huddled inside a hollow tree. Rourke's fever broke sometime after midnight, and Clara found herself watching him as he slept. A man like that, he'd made enemies for telling the truth. She respected that. Hell, she envied it. She remembered her husband, Joseph, and the things they hadn't said in the end. The way silence can kill faster than a bullet. "I ain't gonna let you die out here, Marshal," she whispered. From the darkness beyond the roots, a twig snapped. Clara froze. She grabbed the rifle. Someone was out there, and they were close. She pressed her back to the wall, heart pounding, finger tightening on the trigger. The snow fell heavier now, smothering every sound. But not enough to silence death. Not tonight. Snow blanketed the world in silence, but Clara's breath was loud in her ears. She crouched at the mouth of the hollow tree, rifle braced, finger on the trigger. The darkness beyond the roots whispered with movement, too deliberate to be wind, too patient to be a wandering elk. Rourke stirred behind her. A ragged breath. Not awake yet, not well enough to stand, but alive. Clara's eyes searched the black. Then there. A faint crunch, soft but unmistakable. A boot in snow. She shifted, careful not to snap a twig or shift the packed dirt beneath her. The rifle rose. Another step. A shadow moved. She exhaled slow and deliberate, then snapped the barrel forward. One more step, and I'll blow daylight through your ribs. A low chuckle. Familiar. Hell, ma'am, came Silas Creed's voice from the dark. I should have known you'd be smarter than you look. Clara didn't blink. I warned you. You did. Another step, and I figured I'd come have a quiet word without my friends. See if we couldn't resolve this civil-like. Her thumb cocked the hammer. Civil's been dead since Virginia burned. He stopped moving. You got the marshal with you. I ain't stupid. Clara stayed silent. You know, he's worth more dead than alive now. Judge upped the price. Too much risk letting him talk. 20,000 last I heard. Her heart beat once, hard. You could walk away from all this, Miss Yates. Hand him over, keep the rifle. Hell, keep the mule too. I won't tell no one. You finished. I'm giving you a chance most folks don't get. I already had my chance, Clara said, and I chose. A pause. Then he said, cold and slow, suit yourself. She fired. The flash lit the forest. Creed dropped low and scrambled behind a tree. Her bullet cracked into bark where his chest had been. Damn it, woman, he shouted. That's how it's going to be? She fired again, sending him running. Then it was quiet again, save for the wind through the pine needles and Rourke's labored breath behind her. Clara turned and knelt beside him. Time to go, she whispered. He tried to speak, but coughed instead. His face was ash-white in the moonlight, lips bloodless. Don't matter if you can stand, she said, half dragging him to the sled. You just need to stay alive. I'll do the rest. By the time the sun crested over the ridgeline, they were half a mile deeper into the forest, trailing through narrow gullies and rock-choked ravines to mask their path. Clara pushed the mule hard, cursing under her breath when the sled hit a frozen rut and jostled Rourke hard enough to draw a grunt. He was fading again. She didn't stop. By midday, they reached the bluff overlooking Dead Man's Creek. The water below moved sluggish under a sheen of thin ice. Jagged rock, walls, funneled wind through the canyon like the devil's breath. It was no place for hiding, but she knew better than to hide. She needed high ground. They followed the creek to a split in the rocks where a narrow trail zigzagged up toward an abandoned prospector's cave. Years ago, Joseph had shown it to her, said if raiders ever came, that's where they'd hole up. She hauled Rourke into the cave, teeth gritted, arms trembling. Inside, the air was dry, cold, but protected. She dropped him near the wall and collapsed beside him. For a moment, neither moved. Then, from somewhere deep in the cave, Rourke spoke. Why'd you save me? Clara didn't answer. He turned his head toward her. His eyes, sunken but steady, met hers. You could have taken the bounty. Hell, you still could. She looked away. I don't trust men who hang wanted signs before they hold trials. Rourke exhaled slowly. Judge Holbrook owns half the territory's lawmen. Pays them to arrest the innocent or anyone with land he wants. Anyone who talks too much gets a bounty on their head. You were one of his marshals. I was, he said, till I started asking the wrong questions. Clara nodded slowly. So now you're a dead man with a price tag. Pretty much. She pulled her coat tighter around her. So was my husband. They shot him in the back for standing in the way of cattle rustlers who paid the sheriff off. No badge ever came to investigate. Rourke was silent. I buried him myself, she said. Then I sold half my stock just to buy a mule. You're tougher than I am. No, she said. I just ain't died yet. Outside, wind howled against the cave mouth. Snow began to fall again, slow at first, then thicker. Clara stirred the fire she'd built from old miners, wood, and watched the embers crawl along the bark. We can't stay here, Rourke said. We won't. They'll find us. Let 'em. He managed a faint smile. You sound like someone with a plan. She stood and loaded bullets into the Henry. I ain't got a plan. I got a spine. That night, Creed came close. She heard him outside, hoofbeats muffled in the snow, then silence. Clara pressed herself to the cave wall, rifle in hand, heart thudding. Rourke lay hidden beneath a blanket of furs, motionless. Then boots on stone. A single figure. Creed entered with a lantern and pistol drawn. His face flickered orange in the low light. "Well," he said, "I figured you might come here." Clara didn't blink. She stood over Rourke, holding the rifle barrel downward like a staff. Creed raised his pistol. "Step aside." "He's already dead," she said. Creed blinked. "What?" "Fever took him. Last night, I kept the body warm so the animals wouldn't sniff it out." Creed hesitated. "You're lying." She said nothing. He moved forward slowly, eyes flicking to the covered form. "He took poison," she said softly. "Didn't want you to have the satisfaction." Creed's mouth tightened. His pistol lowered slightly. "He got the last word, though," Clara added. "Told me about Holbrook. Told me names. You're on the list." Creed paled, then growled, "You're bluffing." She didn't move. "You give me that body, and I might still let you walk." "I don't want to walk," she said. "I want to bury him." Creed looked at her long and hard. Then, with a sneer, he turned and left. Snow swallowed his footsteps as he vanished down the trail. Clara didn't breathe until the cave was quiet again. Rourke opened one eye. "You're a hell of a liar." "I'm a widow," she said. "Same thing." He chuckled weakly, then winced. "You bought us time. That's more than I had yesterday." "How much time do we need?" He looked at her grimly. "Enough to make them pay." 2 days passed. Clara trapped rabbits and melted snow. She changed his bandages, watched his color return in slow, painful inches. He sat up on the 3rd day, ate hard biscuits, spoke in complete sentences. "You ever shoot anyone?" he asked as they watched the valley below. "Once," she said. "Didn't kill him, but he limped afterward." Good enough. Creed had regrouped with his men. They knew that. She spotted smoke from a campfire on the ridge one morning, watched silhouettes move between pines. "They're waiting for us to slip," Rourke said. "We won't." "You say that like you believe it." "I say it because I have to." The snow let up on the 5th morning. Blue sky broke through clouds, and the sun turned the frozen creek into glass. They packed their supplies, bundled the rifle and saddlebag, and climbed out of the ravine. Clara walked beside the mule. Rourke rode, stiff but upright. She led them west, toward Devil's Spine. It was a jagged stretch of shale and wind-carved stone, rising above the timber like a dead man's hand clawing the sky. The miners said it was cursed. Clara didn't care. She knew Creed would camp low, near the open water. He'd expect them to sneak down the valley. He wouldn't expect them to come down from above. They made it by nightfall, crouched in a crevice overlooking a weather-beaten shack below. Lanterns flickered inside. 2 men sat on crates, drinking, laughing. One was Creed. The other, a young one with nervous eyes and twitchy fingers. "They're waiting on a signal," Rourke whispered. "Probably have others on the ridge." Clara nodded. "You take the path. I'll stay high." We split their attention. He looked at her, serious. "If I don't make it, you will." He hesitated. "You're not what I expected." She smiled faintly. "Most men say that after I hit M with a shovel." Then she slid up the ridge and vanished into the night. Rourke descended, each step a gamble, each breath a prayer. He approached the shack slow, hands raised. "Don't shoot." Creed stood fast, gun drawn. "Well now," he said, "thought you were dead." "You'll wish I was," Rourke said. The young gun aimed too, but looked nervous. Rourke stepped forward. "Holbrook's dead. Got word yesterday. Stagecoach ambush." Whole ring fell apart. Creed blinked. "You're lying to—" "No," Rourke said. "I've got papers, names, witnesses, and if I die here, they go to Washington." Creed's jaw worked. Then he lunged forward. A shot cracked. The young gun spun and dropped. Clara's bullet from the ridge struck true. Creed whirled to fire at her. Rourke tackled him. They hit the ground hard. Guns flying, fists flying harder. Creed was stronger. Rage drove him. But Rourke fought like a man who'd already seen death and wasn't afraid of meeting him again. They rolled into the dirt, blood on both their faces. Creed drew a knife. Then Clara was there. She didn't shout, didn't hesitate. She drove her own blade between Creed's ribs just above the belt line. He stiffened, eyes wide, then fell. The shack fell silent. Rourke sat back, chest heaving. Clara dropped the knife and looked down at the body. Wasn't clean, she said. Doesn't need to be, Rourke replied. It just needs to be done. She looked up at him. What now? He stood slowly. There's still a bounty on my head, but now I've got a witness. And I've got questions. He smiled tiredly. Come with me. To testify. To make things right. She glanced back toward the trail. Snow falling again. All right, she said. But next time, you pull the damn sled. They buried Creed just after dawn, beneath a cottonwood split by lightning, the wind tearing through its naked limbs like ghosts arguing with God. Clara stood over the shallow grave with her arms crossed, the cold biting through her duster. Rourke knelt in silence, one hand resting on the mound of earth, as if paying respects, though to what, Clara couldn't tell. Justice, maybe, or something more personal. The shack stood crooked in the background, one wall scorched where a lantern had spilled in the scuffle, smoke still curling like dying breath. The bodies of Creed's men lay nearby, wrapped in canvas. They decided to leave them. Wolves had to eat, same as men. Rourke stood slowly. He burned most of the papers. Clara nodded, but not all. They'd found it in the ashes. One letter, half-charred, edges crumbling, a name, a seal, a line scrawled in panicked handwriting. Asterisk, Marshall Elias Rourke is not to be trusted. Eliminate him before he speaks. H asterisk. Clara folded it carefully and slid it into her coat. Enough to start something. Or get me hanged before I get a word out, Rourke said. She looked at him. He was still pale, still limping, but his eyes were clear now, his hands steady. A man no longer running, but not safe either. You said there's a man in Helena. One who knows everything. Judge Niles. He's old but clean. Only one who ever stood up to Holbrook. Then that's where we go. You sure? Rourke asked. I can go it alone. Clara gave a humorless smile. I didn't walk through hell to watch you burn alone. They left Devil's Spine that afternoon, winding through narrow passes, the snow turning to slush beneath the hooves of the mule and the creak of saddlebags. They spoke little. The land around them grew harsher, but the silence was easier now, no longer heavy with mistrust. Just two people moving forward, past the smoke and blood. By the second night, they made camp near a frozen spring. Clara cooked beans over a fire and passed the tin plate to Rourke. He took it without thanks, but with a nod. That was enough. You ever think about starting over? He asked. She looked into the flames. Used to. When Joseph died, I told myself I'd plan again in the spring. But spring never came. Just more debts, more graves. You planted something anyway, Rourke said. Clara tilted her head. What do you mean? He looked at her, firelight flickering in his eyes. You saved a man when every reason said not to. You held the line when you could have sold your soul. That's something. She stared at the fire. For a long time, neither spoke. When they rode into Helena 3 days later, the sky was overcast, clouds low like a lid over the mountains. The town wasn't much, just a few dozen buildings scattered around a muddy main street, but the courthouse stood proud at the center, its brick walls clean, flags snapping in the wind. Clara could feel eyes on them the moment they hit town. 2 riders paused at the blacksmith shop. Another man leaned just a little too far out of a saloon door. Word traveled fast in these parts. Rourke stiffened in the saddle. They know I'm here. Then don't give them reason to draw. He nodded, and they dismounted in front of the courthouse. Inside, the warmth was welcome, but the stairs weren't. A clerk behind a desk looked up and paled when he saw Rourke. I need to see Judge Niles, Rourke said, voice steady. The clerk swallowed. He's in session. Not anymore, Clara said, stepping forward. She placed the charred letter on the desk. Show him that. The man picked it up with trembling fingers, scanned the contents, and stood. 1 moment. 10 minutes later, they sat before Judge Niles in a wood-paneled chamber that smelled of old paper and older tobacco. The judge was gray-bearded, sharp-eyed, and looked like he'd chewed through more than one politician in his day. He read the letter twice. Then he leaned back and sighed. Rourke, thought you were dead. Not for lack of trying, Rourke said. And this woman? Clara Yates. Widow. She saved my life. Clara said nothing, just met the judge's gaze. He held it a moment, then nodded. You know this ain't enough. Holbrook had men in every county from here to Kansas. They'll say you forged it. I know, Rourke said, but I also know who carried out the hits. I've got names, times, witnesses. You have them. I will. Niles scratched his beard. You'll need to testify. Put it all on the record. Public. Rourke glanced at Clara. We will. Clara arched a brow. We. You dragged me out of a grave, remember? The judge sighed again. We'll hold a hearing tomorrow. Quiet like, but if word gets out. It already has, Clara said. We were followed into town. Niles stood. Then we best move fast. They stayed in the sheriff's quarters that night, a two-room house behind the jail with barred windows and a locked front door. Clara cleaned her rifle while Rourke wrote out every detail. He could remember names, dates, places, until his hand cramped and the lamp burned low. You trust him? Clara asked, nodding toward the window where Niles had disappeared hours before. More than most. She frowned. That ain't saying much. Rourke smiled. Just past midnight, gunfire shattered the glass. Clara rolled off her cot, rifle in hand before her feet hit the floor. Rourke crawled to the desk, grabbed the documents. Back door, she barked. The sheriff was already there, pistol drawn, shouting for backup. Clara and Rourke slipped out into the alley just as a Molotov hit the front wall, fire licking up the frame. Men were shouting. Horses screamed. They ran. Down a side alley, through the butcher's yard, past hanging hide stiff with ice. Rourke grunted with every step, the wound in his back tearing fresh with exertion, but he didn't slow. They ducked into the apothecary and slammed the door. Clara turned to him, panting, You still got the papers? He held them up. She scanned the street through the window. We won't make it to the courthouse. Then we don't need the courthouse. She turned. What? We get it to the paper. The Helena Times. They print it, it's public. Everyone sees. No cover-up. No spin. Clara nodded. Where? Rourke pointed. 2 blocks south. Red building, green shutters. They burst out into the street and ran. Bullets snapped past. Clara returned fire once, scattering the shooters. Rourke stumbled, caught himself on a rail post, and pushed on. The print shop loomed ahead. A flickering lantern glowed inside. Clara slammed through the door. A wiry man behind the press jumped to his feet. We need your help, Rourke said, breath ragged. You print this now, whole truth, names and all. The man scanned the documents, eyes widening. Lord Almighty, this is treason. No, Clara said. It's justice. He hesitated, only a second. Then he nodded. Within minutes, the presses clanked to life. Ink rolled. Paper flew. Outside, the posse closed in. Rourke collapsed into a chair, bleeding through his bandages. Clara crouched beside him, gripping his hand. You stay with me, she whispered. He nodded weakly. I'm trying. The door burst open. Judge Niles strode in, flanked by deputies. We've secured the courthouse, he said. And your story, your evidence, it'll be all over town by morning. You've done it. Rourke tried to smile. Wasn't just me. The judge turned to Clara. You'll both need protection. Clara looked down at Rourke, then out the window where the first rays of morning lit the street. No, she said. We don't run anymore. And she meant it. They spent the next days under guard, but the tide turned fast. As the paper spread, people came forward, witnesses, victims, even a few honest lawmen tired of the rot. Holbrook's empire crumbled like dry bone. The bounty on Rourke vanished. 1 week later, Clara stood beside him in the courthouse as he swore testimony, his voice clear, his hands steady. When it was done, he turned to her. So, he said, you going back to your land? I might. You could come with me. Start over. She smiled. That sounds suspiciously like a proposal. It's an idea, he said, smiling back. 1 step at a time. She nodded. All right, but I still get to shoot first if someone comes calling. Rourke laughed. I wouldn't have it any other way. The world hadn't changed. Not yet, but they had, and that was enough. So, what do we take from this tale? Maybe it's this. The law isn't always justice. and justice doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes, the only thing standing between truth and a bullet is a woman with a past, a rifle, and the will to do what's right, even when it costs her everything. If Clara and Rourke's story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, heroes don't always ride in with trumpets. Sometimes they walk in from the barn, drag you off the floor, and say, "You've got until morning." Then we fight. It started with a letter. By the time the ink dried on the Helena Times front page, Marshall Elias Rourke wasn't just a man with a bullet in his back and blood on his hands. He was a lightning rod, and the storm was coming hard. The paper had named names: Holbrook's allies in Dodge, Cheyenne, and Denver, deputies on his payroll, judges who'd look the other way, a dozen bounty killers with federal blind eyes. Rourke's testimony had lit the fuse. Now the town buzzed like a beehive poked with a branding iron. Clara kept her rifle cleaned and loaded. Every sound outside the window pulled her gaze. Every boot step near the sheriff's office tightened the muscles in her neck. Rourke, for all his grit, was still healing. His steps dragged. His hands trembled when he gripped his tin coffee mug too hard. She watched him from the porch that afternoon, limping across the boardwalk, his coat flapping in the dry wind. Two kids darted around him, kicking a rock, not knowing they'd passed a man worth more dead than alive in 4 territories. "You should rest," she said as he climbed the steps. He gave her a sideways smile. "Can't. Judge Niles says half the town's coming to testify tomorrow. We'll need to get statements, names on record. We're past hiding now." "We're also past safe," Clara muttered. "You feel it, don't you?" He nodded, like thunder under the floorboards. And it hit just after sundown. The first shots cracked down by the livery stable, 2 sharp barks, followed by panic shouting. Then fire. A glow rose over the rooftops like a second crooked sunrise. Clara jumped from her chair. "They're here." Rourke already had his gun belt on, teeth clenched against pain. Deputy Sykes barreled into the room, his shirt torn, blood on his cheek. 4 riders, maybe more, lit the stables. "I think they want to draw us out." Rourke's voice was ice. "Who saw him?" Charlie from the freight depot said he recognized Clay Morrow and Duffy Travers. Clara's blood chilled. "Gunmen. Real ones." "They've been paid well," Rourke added grimly. "They won't leave until I'm bleeding." Sykes wiped sweat from his brow. "We've got 6 good men. That's all." "6 more than I had in Abilene," Rourke muttered, and Clara realized he was smiling. She slapped the rifle into his hands. "This ain't a time for bravado." "No, ma'am," he said, eyes blazing. "It's time for war." They didn't wait for the bounty hunters to make the next move. Rourke wasn't that kind of lawman. Under the shroud of smoke and falling ash, the 3 of them, Clara, Rourke, and Sykes, made their way to the old mill outside town, where Judge Niles had sent the townsfolk who'd agreed to testify. 20 people, farmers, saloon girls, even a freight man with a busted leg, were huddled under lantern light, scared but resolved. "We've got less than an hour before they realize we're not in the sheriff's office," Rourke told the room. "Once they do, they'll burn their way here." Clara looked across the gathering. They were brave, but not warriors. She stepped forward. "We've got wagons. We stack them, tip barrels, post shooters, funnel them where we want. We hold them long enough for Rourke to get the testimonies recorded and sealed." "You want us to fight?" one man said. "I want you to survive," Clara answered. "But you won't unless you stand." Silence. Then a rusted voice from the back. Old Miss Prudy, blind in one eye and carrying a shotgun as long as her arm. "I've been waiting 40 years to kill a man for something righteous." The room broke into nervous chuckles and then nods. They fortified the mill. Wagons upturned. A broken thresher turned sideways to form a barricade. Clara took the high post in the hayloft. Her rifle sighted down the approach road. Sykes organized firing positions. Rourke moved table to table, collecting signatures and sworn statements while his body bled under the bandage. And then the thunder came. 6 riders. No lanterns. No words. Just movement. Silent, purposeful. Black dust rising underhoof. Clara watched them ride in, wolves in human skin. One with a red scarf. One with no shirt and painted skin. One, big barrel-chested, carried a double barrel like a priest carries scripture. "Let 'em come closer," Clara whispered. She waited. Now, the crack of her rifle cut the night clean in two. The man with the red scarf toppled from his saddle. Gunfire exploded from the barricades. Chaos. Screams. Horses rearing. Buckshot shattering barrels. Clara fired again, missed. Someone was shouting her name. A figure vaulted the barricade. Clara turned. Her finger clenched. Rourke was there first, slamming into the intruder with a grunt. They tumbled, grappling in the mud, and Clara watched as Rourke drove a knife into man's throat. He stood, gasping, crimson soaking his coat. More riders circled. The front was crumbling. The double barrel barked, and Deputy Sykes fell. Clara felt rage like wildfire in her chest. She leapt from the loft, hit the dirt, rolled. Came up firing. 2 down. Then a third. 1 bullet tore her shoulder. She gritted her teeth, cocked, fired again. Rourke screamed her name, and she turned. Too late. The last rider, blood-slick and grinning, had come through the side door. Gun raised. 5 feet from Rourke. Clara couldn't shoot. No time. So she ran. Threw herself between them. The gun went off. White light. Then silence. When she opened her eyes, she was on the floor. Blood on her chest. But not hers. Rourke lay over her, eyes wide, breathing shallow, blood pouring for his side. "No," she breathed. No. He tried to speak. Failed. The rider was gone. Sykes had dragged him down with a dying shot. Clara held Rourke's face. "Stay. You hear me? You stay." His lips moved. She leaned close. He whispered, "You got till morning. Then we fight." She choked on a sob. "Don't you damn die on me now," she whispered. "I won't," he rasped. "Not yet." By dawn, it was over. 3 bounty hunters dead. 2 gone into the hills. The town had come alive at last. Dozens of men and women, armed and furious, chasing the last of Holbrook's dogs from their land. The documents were sealed, signed, carried east by the fastest rider in town. Holbrook's name was Ash now. 2 days later, Judge Niles stepped up to the gallows platform, not for a hanging, but for a declaration. Rourke stood beside him, cane in hand, bandaged tight. Clara watched from the edge of the crowd, arm in a sling, eyes sharp. "We hereby declare," Niles shouted, "that Marshal Elias Rourke has acted with honor, risked his life in defense of the people, and will face no further pursuit by bounty or law. He is and shall remain free." The crowd cheered. Hats flew. Clara didn't smile. Not yet. Later, she sat beside him on the bench outside the courthouse. "You're free now," she said. Rourke nodded. "So are you." She looked at him. "I was free the moment I dragged you out of the barn." He laughed, then winced. "That hurt." "You earned it." They watched the townsfolk pass, faces lighter, voices louder. "Life coming back. What do you do now?" she asked. He looked at the mountains. "Someplace quiet. Build a cabin. Grow old." She grinned. "That a proposal?" He turned, eyes soft. "It's a hope." She leaned in, kissed his cheek. "Well, I'm not done fighting. But I could use a place to rest my boots." They sat together, the scars of war still healing, the dust of violence settling behind them. But the road ahead, maybe, just maybe, was wide open. And if the world came for them again, they'd be ready. Because some things were worth bleeding for, and some people were worth staying alive for.